Joe Rogan started out as a stand-up comedian and television actor in the early 1990s before slowly growing to become one of the biggest podcasters in the world. Today, Joe Rogan and his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. This comes in spite of the fact that the controversial comedian seems to be causing more outrage than ever with his statements, both past and present. Join Trender as we take a look at why fans are lashing out against Joe Rogan and why his time is up. Despite the fact that Joe Rogan is host of what is arguably the most popular podcast in the world, he seems to be becoming more and more of a controversial figure each day. In 2020, Joe Rogan sold the exclusive rights for his podcast, titled The Joe Rogan Experience, to streaming platform Spotify for a whopping sum of $100 million. By this point, the stand-up comedian and UFC commentator had already been working on his podcast in some shape or form for over a decade. Joe was one of the first celebrities to jump on the podcast wagon, and few could have predicted during the early days of the show that it was eventually going to be making headlines, not only for the amount of money it was bringing in, but also for being one of the most consistently controversial mainstream media programs around. When it comes to the numerous controversies that Joe Rogan has found himself embroiled in both before and since the $100 million exclusive rights deal with Spotify, the list is seemingly endless. The most recent controversy involving Joe Rogan is the fact that the Italian stand-up comedian seems to think that he has a free pass to say the N-word whenever he wants. Recently, Grammy-winning artist India Arie uploaded a compilation video featuring over 20 instances of the comedian saying the infamous slur. India's upload of the compilation video came alongside a statement that she was going to have her music removed from Spotify until Joe Rogan was no longer a part of the streaming platform. India is far from the only musician that has made this demand, with other musicians, such as Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, having asked to have their music removed from the platform previously. Each time, Spotify has removed said musical artist's music while keeping the Joe Rogan Experience. However, Spotify has removed over 100 episodes of the podcast from its platform. When confronted with the N-word compilation video, Joe Rogan claimed that his usages of the word were taken out of context and seemed much worse than they actually were. According to India Arie, the N-word is a word that should never be uttered by someone like Joe Rogan in any situation. Joe's use of the N-word isn't the first time the comedian has been racially insensitive. In one episode of the podcast, he recounted a story where he and his friends were dropped off in a predominantly black neighborhood of Philadelphia in a taxi, and Joe Rogan said he felt like he had arrived inside the movie The Planet of the Apes. The remark involving the Planet of the Apes drew a good deal of controversy, and Joe Rogan subsequently deleted the episode and claimed that it was a very stupid thing for him to have said. According to the consistently controversial comedian, he was just trying to get a laugh. Despite the controversial statements that Joe Rogan has made involving black people, the comedian has featured plenty of positive black role models on his show, including activist Daryl Davis. Before the recent N-word controversy, people were mad at Joe Rogan because he was spreading supposed misinformation about COVID-19. From the beginning of the pandemic, Joe Rogan was critical of both mask and vaccine mandates. Because of this, the comedian came under fire from many figures that felt that the podcast host was abusing his powers and popularity. Things got even worse when Joe Rogan was diagnosed with COVID-19 himself and publicly documented his self-treatment using the drug ivermectin. Use of the drug has not been recommended by authorities to treat COVID-19, with ivermectin predominantly being used to treat parasitic infections. However, Joe Rogan claimed he had luck using ivermectin to treat his COVID-19 diagnosis, and people felt that this sent the wrong message to his fans. Joe Rogan's decidedly unprofessional medical advice prompted a group of medical professionals to come together and write the stand-up comedian an open letter, pleading for him to be more careful about what kind of information he's spreading on his show. This alleged misinformation is also what caused musicians Neil Young and Joni Mitchell to enact their aforementioned Spotify boycotts. If you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to hit the like button to show your support. Also, subscribe to the channel if you'd like to be among the first to know when more awesome Trender videos are on their way. In response to his recent controversies, Joe Rogan claims that he's just a dirty stand-up comedian and that he shouldn't be taken seriously as either a source of information or a social commentator. Much of Joe's recent controversies came from the fact that he's now reaching a wider audience than ever before, and his views are therefore subject to more scrutiny than they've ever been. Joe has always aimed to be a groundbreaking and controversial figure in his career, whether as a stand-up comedian or as a podcast host. Since the initial days of the Joe Rogan Experience's inception, the podcast has always had a strong emphasis on marijuana use. Joe has been featured smoking marijuana with his guests countless times on the program, with smoking of the herb being legal in California, where the podcast is recorded and filmed. One of the most notable figures that Joe Rogan has ever gotten to light up a joint on his show is celebrity billionaire Elon Musk. Joe pulled a joint out and asked the SpaceX founder if he'd ever smoked before, to which Elon replied that he had once or twice. The two then proceeded to smoke the joint on the podcast, with the clip going on to become one of Joe's most watched weed-smoking parties ever. Of course, Elon Musk has also poised himself as somewhat of a controversial figure, both thanks to his shilling of cryptocurrencies and the fact that he shares Joe's general beliefs about the COVID-19 pandemic. Perhaps the most controversial guest that has ever appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience is far-right radio show host Alex Jones. Joe and Alex have been friends for decades, and Alex has appeared on Joe's podcast numerous times. The most recent occurrence of Alex appearing on the podcast was in October of 2020, and this appearance came after a period of notable controversy, wherein Joe Rogan was put to the task to defend Alex's previous appearances on the program. Prior to the appearance, Alex Jones has become more controversial of a figure than ever before, thanks to his statements involving the Sandy Hook massacre. According to Alex Jones, everyone involved in the shooting was an actor and the event was faked. Prior to Alex Jones's October 2020 appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, many felt that Joe Rogan was going to break contact with the far-right radio show host permanently and never have him on the program again. However, Joe decided that standing by his old friend was more important than caving in to the demands of the public. When Alex Jones made his appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience in October of 2020, it immediately became one of the most watched episodes of the show in its history. When Alex Jones appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience in October of 2020, it drew ire from people within Spotify's own offices. Prior appearances by Alex Jones on the program had occurred before the rights acquisition by the streaming giant. Since the controversy, all episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience featuring Alex Jones have been removed from the streaming platform. Other controversial statements that Joe Rogan has made include his unfounded assertion that far-left activists were behind the 2020 California wildfires. When Joe made the claim, he allegedly thought that what he was saying was true. However, after the podcast became available for streaming, he realized that he had been wrong. According to Joe, he had believed that several arrests had been made in Portland, Oregon, of far-left activists trying to start wildfires. When he became aware that no such arrests ever occurred, Joe apologized and had the episode taken down. As already discussed, Joe Rogan's routine defense when he's caught saying things that are untrue or problematic is that he's just a dirty stand-up comedian who shouldn't be taken seriously. However, the sad fact is that the comedian's podcast is taken fairly seriously by a wide majority of his audience. Just as Joe Rogan may falsely parrot unproven beliefs on his show without checking for facts first, so too may his audience falsely parrot what he says without ever checking to see whether or not the comedian actually knows what he's talking about. When it comes to topics such as pandemics and social justice, many people feel that there is little room for margin of error when it comes to public speech, such as the kind Joe is engaging in. Meanwhile, the more the world tries to keep Joe Rogan's mouth shut, the more the controversial Italian comedian feels that it's his duty to allow differing viewpoints to be expressed on his program. Joe Rogan is the host of one of the most popular podcasts in the world, but many are feeling that the controversial stand-up comedian has gone as far as he can go when it comes to outraging his fans. Now, it's time to hear from you. Did you know that Joe Rogan has said the N-word numerous times on his popular podcast, and that he's longtime friends with far-right radio show host Alex Jones? As always, like this video to show your support, and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you'd like to be among the first to know when more awesome trender videos are on their way.